Within the Pokemon franchise, there are a few different classifications of Pokemon that are officially recognized. For instance, we've got legendaries, mythicals, starters, etc. Things get a little bit more complex when you get into things like sub-legendaries, which are coded into the games officially as legendaries, but are sometimes allowed in tournaments and certain game modes in which most legendaries are banned. Then we get into fan-made classifications, which, in my opinion, are where things get really cool. The most commonly known of these is the pseudo-legendary category, which isn't officially recognized by Game Freak, but there are common markers of what Pokemon qualify as such. For instance, these Pokemon all have a base stat total of 600, they all have 3-stage evolutionary lines, there are usually 1 per generation with the lone exception of Gen 3 which has 2, and they all require exactly 1.25 million experience points to get to level 100. One of the less commonly known and less clear categories, however, is the Semi-Pseudo Legendary one. Broadly speaking, these are Pokemon that are sometimes confused with being either Pseudo-Legendaries or Legendaries by some fans, and they typically have base stats higher than 500 but less than 600. Today I figured it would be fun to count down the top 10 strongest Semi-Pseudo Legendaries of all time based on how they perform in competitive single battles. Without any further ado, let's get into the countdown. At number 10, we have a Pokemon that both fits really well on this list, but also kind of doesn't. Slacking. Now Slacking is a weird one because it actually has a higher base stat total than all the pseudo-legendaries despite also having a 3-stage evolution. But this also makes it the perfect candidate in another way because its 670 base stat total is right up there with the actual legendaries, being the same as Zacian, Zamazenta, Regigigas, Groudon, and Kyogre, and being much higher than many legendaries and mythicals too. Given this, it's easy to see why its classification is a bit tough. But why would it be at the bottom of the list of semi-pseudo-legendaries if it's so powerful? Well, even though it has insane stats, Slacking is really hurt by its ability called Truant, which basically only allows it to attack once every other turn, effectively cutting its attack power in half and being completely vulnerable to opposing attacks for half the battle. For this reason, it isn't used by many people at all. In fact, it doesn't even qualify for any of the tiers in competitive battling, and that's why it's going to occupy the lowest position on this list. If Slacking somehow gets into the Galar region with the upcoming DLC, people who play doubles should look out, however, as pairing it with Galarian Weezing with neutralizing gas means its Truant ability will disappear and it will be completely unchained. Until then, it's definitely the worst overall Semi-Pseudo Legendary. Stomping into this top 10 at number 9 is going to be another Gen 3 Pokemon, Angeron. It's fairly easy to see why this Pokemon might be confused as a pseudo-legendary. Angeron is another 3-stage evolution Pokemon with a base stat total of 530, which is respectable but not quite pseudo-legendary status. Not only does it have one of those beastly designs that are typical of the pseudos, but Gen 3 also introduced Metagross as a second pseudo-legendary in addition to Salamence, meaning the lines were kind of blurred since it was the only time that there was more than one pseudo, and it was of course not a dragon type, which is also rare among them. While Angeron is a strong-looking Pokemon with a respectable base stat total, its competitive performance isn't that great as it's in the worst tier in competitive battling, the PU tier. It does have a great ability in Rock Head, which means it takes no recoil damage from moves like Stab 150 Power Head Smash, and defensively its typing is mostly good with 8 resistances and 1 immunity, but it does have 2 4x weaknesses to 2 very good and very common types, Fighting and Ground, and its special defense and HP stats are quite bad. Next up, we've got an interesting pick, a Gen 5 Pokemon, Zoroark. Now normally this Pokemon wouldn't really be given consideration for this category since it's only a 2-stage Pokemon and only has a base stat total of 510. But funnily enough, some people do confuse it with either being a pseudo or even a legendary. I think it comes down to the fact that it's considered to be a mascot Pokemon of sorts, just like some other Pokemon later in the list, and it also has mysterious abilities and a unique aura to it. Due to this status, Zoroark is often featured in Pokemon media with other legendaries and is used as the signature Pokemon of some powerful characters too. Zoroark's offensive power and speed are quite impressive, and this is combined with its unique ability called Illusion, in which it appears to be a different Pokemon from your party when you first send it out, which can definitely throw off opponents. It also has access to Nasty Plot to increase its special attack further, and great coverage moves such as Stab Dark Pulse, Focus Blast, Sludge Bomb, and Flamethrower. Despite all of these assets, it is quite frail, and it is only in the RU-BL tier in competitive battling, meaning it's banned from rarely used but doesn't quite make the underused tier. At number 7, we have one of my all-time favorite Pokemon and the mascot of my channel, Kingdra. Kingdra to me is one of the biggest shoo-ins for being a pseudo-legendary, and if we were to base it solely on which Pokemon should have been a pseudo, it very well might top it. Not only does Kingdra have a 3-stage evolution line, but it was also the only new dragon Pokemon introduced in Generation 2, and even appears pretty late in the Johto Pokedex. Yet it didn't get a pseudo spot since it was only given a base stat total of 540. This makes Generation 2 the only generation out of all 8 not to have a pseudo-legendary dragon. Why, Game Freak? Competitively speaking though, Kingdra still holds its own despite being severely underrated. Its water and dragon typing is incredible, having 3 resistances and only 2 weaknesses. Its base stats are also super well rounded right across the board, making it quite tanky and offensively impressive with moves like Draco Meteor and Hydro Pump, but it can also pull off physical moves quite well and gets access to Dragon Dance, making it very unpredictable. It also has incredible abilities in Sniper and Swift Swim, which doubles its speed and rain in addition to the stab water power boost it'll get. Despite all of this, Kingdra is somehow only in the NUBL tier, meaning it's banned from Never Used but doesn't quite make the RU tier. Rain teams are certainly prevalent in Gen 8 though, and in the Showdown Full National Dex Gen 8 metagame, this thing has one of the top 3 usage stats on this list, so we'll just have to wait until the DLC releases for it to get its chance to really shine. Up next is definitely a fan favorite, Flygon. Now Flygon is in a similar situation to Kingdra with its 3-stage evolutionary line, but at least Gen 3 did already have a pseudo-legendary dragon. All the same, this thing is confused with being a pseudo every now and then, but it only has a base stat total of 520. The only thing that really puts this thing above Kingdra for now is that it doesn't rely as much on weather and really stands up on its own with Dragon Dance, Outrage, Earthquake, and U-Turn along with its great Levitate ability, although its 4x Ice weakness is definitely a hindrance. Even in the Gen 8 National Dex metagame, Flygon is performing better than it did in Gen 7, currently being in the UU tier, which is an impressive jump from its standard RU status. Breaking into the top half of the list, we've got our first Gen 6 Pokemon, Noivern. Now Noivern is a very understandable semi-pseudo, even though it's only got a 2-stage evolutionary line, as its Gen 6 pseudo counterpart, Goodra, well, let's be honest, it doesn't quite fit the pseudo-legendary design mold comparatively. Noivern's got incredible base stats with a 535 total, solid defenses and HP, and a wicked 123 speed and a solid 103 special attack. Like many pseudos, it's got sweeper stats, but with enough defenses to actually make it quite tank-like, and its infiltrator ability bypasses things like Reflect and Light Screen too. It's got access to amazing stab moves like Hurricane with a chance to confuse, and Draco Meteor, U-Turn for pivoting, and it's even got Roost to heal up its health. Noivern has also improved upon Gen 8's release, moving from RU to UU, finally getting some of that recognition that it deserves. Up next is a really interesting Pokemon that I'm sure many people will be happy to see on here. Arcanine. Now upon first glance, one might be like, why would Arcanine be on here? Yes, it's a decent Pokemon, but it's a random fire type and has a 2-stage evolution line. Well, I'm sure that there is the odd rare person who confuses it for being a pseudo, but the main reason why it qualifies as a semi-pseudo legendary is that it was actually supposed to be a legendary Pokemon when it was first created. And we see this reflected in the anime when it's shown alongside the legendary birds. Its official category is even the legendary Pokemon, and it's the only Pokemon to have that classification. As such, many people want it to get its legendary status back as intended, and hey, I'm not against that, it's a wickedly cool Pokemon. Arcanine has a surprisingly high base stat total of 555, which is the closest that we've gotten to 600 so far, just 45 away. All of its base stats are 80 or higher, making it super bulky, very powerful, and decently fast too, with the great Intimidate and Flash Fire abilities to go along with it, along with great moves like Stab Flare Blitz, Priority Extreme Speed, Play Rough, Crunch, Outrage, Morning Sun for recovery, and even close combat. Like Flygon and Noivern, Arcanine has also jumped from RU to UU in the National Dex metagame, and in my opinion, it's well deserved. And for the bronze medal, we've got one that a lot of people confuse with being a pseudo-legendary, Haxorus. Haxorus has a lot of the markers of being a pseudo, like being a beastly dragon type, being closer to the end of the Gen 5 Dex, and having a 3-stage evolutionary line. However, its base stat total doesn't quite qualify it at 540. Haxorus is a very powerful Pokemon with an insane 147 attack, okay defenses, and a pretty decent speed at 97, which can of course be boosted with Dragon Dance, along with powerful moves like Stab Outrage, Close Combat, Earthquake, Crunch, etc., with surprising coverage capabilities. Haxorus is in the upper UU tier and has been dominating there for quite some time, undoubtedly making it one of the best semi-pseudos. A case could certainly be made for it even being on par with some of the regular pseudo-legendary dragons. The second last spot on this top 10 is going to go to Gen 4's Lucario. Now, Lucario is in a similar situation as Zoroark, except I would argue to an even greater extent in that it's truly become a mascot for the series and is featured even more so along legendary Pokemon in various Pokemon media, and has that same mystical aura surrounding it. Being confused with a pseudo-legendary I suppose is possible, but I would say it's more likely to be confused with an actual legendary, especially by kids, and because both it and Riolu are incredibly rare to find in the main series games, usually only being given as a gift to the protagonist or at most being found in one late location in-game. Lucario's base stat total is a respectable 525 with okay defenses all at 70. Both of its offensive stats are great and its speed is pretty good too. Lucario's moveset is where it really shines though, as it can operate specially or physically and throw off the opponent with stab moves like Close Combat, Meteor Mash, and Stab Priority Bullet Punch on the physical side, then Flash Cannon and Aura Sphere on the special side. It also has power-up moves like Swords Dance and Nasty Plot, and further coverage like Priority Extreme Speed, Earthquake, Dark Pulse, etc. It also has a few great abilities, with its most notable perhaps being its Justified ability, which raises its attack stat one stage if it's hit by a Dark-type move, which is very easy to predict and take advantage of. Lucario has been topping the UU tier for a while now, and it's certainly one of the best choices for this list. And the number one semi-pseudo legendary Pokemon of all time has to be none other than Gen 5's Volcarona. Now, yes, Volcarona is part of a two-stage evolutionary line and isn't a dragon type, but in every other respect it's so incredibly easy to confuse it with both pseudos and legendaries. Perhaps most notably the fact that it's obtained in Gen 5 in an overworld encounter in a secret part of the Relic Castle, which feels so much like a legendary encounter that people wondered for a while if it really was one. It's also got a beastly design and a 550 base stat total, which is really good. The only mediocre stat that it makes use of is its physical defense, but otherwise its special attack is insane along with its special defense and speed. Where Volcarona really shines is its access to the move Quiver Dance, which raises its special attack, special defense, and speed. Despite being a consistent presence in OU, Volcarona has always suffered from its half-health loss from Stealth Rock, but Gen 8 of course introduced the heavy-duty boots item, which negates the effect of any field hazards, so it shot up right to the top of OU, being the 6th most used Pokemon in the National Dex OU tier out of nearly 1,000, including forums and megas. All of these factors make Volcarona the champion of the semi-pseudo legendaries. Well, there we go everyone, the top 10 semi-pseudo legendaries in Pokemon. I haven't done a countdown video in a long time, so if you enjoyed it, please be sure to let me know and leave a like on the video if you'd like to see more. Let me know in the comments what Pokemon surprised you and any other Pokemon you think should be considered as semi-pseudos. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you're the first to see new videos. If you guys enjoy my content and want to support it and get some cool perks, feel free to check out my Patreon in the description below. With that being said, this has been Soul Spectre, and I'll see you guys next time for another Pokemon video.